You should start. Bismillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسول رب العالمين وعلى آله الطاهرين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we've gathered today to talk about the seerah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and inshallah when we go through the seerah this time it will be kind of different, as in the approach we take to things, and inshallah how we'll go about doing it will be more discussion focused rather than just me sort of telling you things. To start with, we're going to go through the definition of okay, I thought this would work. Okay. To start with, we're just going to go through the definition of what seerah actually means, and we're going to talk about the sources of seerah and what they actually are. So does anyone know what the word seerah means in the Arabic language? You can say if you want. So seerah, it means biography. It comes from the Arabic word sara yasiru sayran, which means to travel and to traverse. And when we talk about the seerah, we're actually traveling with someone and traveling with them for the entirety of their lives, and that's why the Arabs called biography a seerah. And when we say the word seerah, absolutely, we mean always, or almost always, we mean the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we mean talking about his life, talking about his attributes, talking about his noble character, and this is what we mean when we talk about the seerah. So seerah comes from the word which means to travel, and it actually takes us on a journey to travel with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when we say seerah, absolutely, it means that exclusively the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what would be the sources of the seerah? Like what would we look back on, and how would we understand where the seerah, how would we understand the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Hadith.
So that's one we can understand from the hadith. But the primary source, like you mentioned, is the Quran, because the Quran is such a book that it's not in chronological order, and that's what is very difficult for a Western reader to read, because in the West we like chronology. We like to start from the beginning and to finish at the end, and we like to go on the journey as it happened. But the Quran confuses the Western reader, because it starts, the first surah is actually that was revealed is actually towards the end of the Quran. So the knowledge of seerah is deeply rooted and goes hand in hand with the knowledge of the Quran, because if we know the seerah and if we appreciate the events that transpired in the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then it will give us a deeper understanding of the Quran, and we will be able to look at the Quran in context. So one of them is the Quran. And who would be the primary people who would pen down the seerah? Who would it be? The Sahaba, the companions. One guy's answering the question, inshallah. It should be a bit interactive. So, inshallah, everyone, don't be shy. You can pitch in. There's not really a wrong answer. So the people around him, around the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were the people who penned down the seerah and wrote about his life. It was first an oral tradition where they would learn about the seerah. Ali, the son of, the grandson of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ali, the son of Ali Hassan and his son Ali, so he was actually the grandson of Ali ibn Abi Talib, he was also called Ali. He mentioned that we were taught the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam just as we were taught the Quran. We were taught the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam just as we were taught the Quran, meaning it was from the fundamental things we were taught, and it was the first things that were taught. Because if we truly have an appreciation for the seerah, then we will have an appreciation for the Quran. So we have transmissions from the early companions, those who lived at his time, and it was initially an oral tradition, but the first people to pen it down were the likes of the student of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, who was the wife of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Her student and her nephew Urwa was one of the first people to actually pen down the seerah, and obviously he was a mahram to her, because for the wives of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they had an extra special hijab. So unlike other women, no one was allowed to actually see their outward body. So they had to have a physical barrier. And this is what Allah alludes to in the Quran when He says, فَاسْأَلُوهُنَّ مِنْ وَرَاءِ hijab, that ask them from behind this physical barrier. But because Urwa was part of the family, he would always be able to go to her, and he had exclusive access to her. And who knew more about the Messenger ﷺ than the person who lived with him and lived with him in his own household. So Urwa was one of the first people to pen down the seerah, but then again it wasn't in a chronological order. we have people like the other minor companions who actually penned down the seerah, and after them you have scholars who came, the students of the Sahaba, who were known as the Tabi'een. The students of the Sahaba are known as the Tabi'een, and those were the people who learned from the companions themselves. And these were people who started to turn this oral tradition into a written tradition, and they started to pen down the seerah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And from it is the likes of Ibn Ishaq, who was a famous historian and a biographer of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And based on his book, it was Ibn Hisham wrote his seerah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these are like the main sources of seerah, where they include everything and they have seerah in a chronological order. So firstly we have, what was the first source for seerah? The Quran. And secondly we have the hadith and the transmissions of the companions who were taught the seerah like they were taught the Quran. It was from the first things that they were taught. So we have books like the book of this is not going to work, is it? So we have book like the book of Urwa, like Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, and we also have a different genre of text that is specifically dedicated to describing the physical attributes of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, describing his character, and this is known as the Shama'il genre in our tradition. So the Shama'il deal with the attributes and character of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, specifically how he spoke, how he drank, how he ate, how he dealt with people, how he slept, what was the nature of his prayer. So all of these things are dealt with in the Shama'il literature. And you also have things like the Dala'il. You have the Dala'il al-Nubuwa by An-Nisaburi and Dala'il al-Nubuwa by Al-Bayhaqi, which Dala'il in Arabic language means proof. So Dala'il are the proofs of prophethood, and this is a specific genre of text that actually have and house the miraculous nature of the Prophet ﷺ's life. Because Ibn Hazm actually mentions, he was one of the famous scholars of Andalusia, southern Spain, Ibn Hazm, who lived there throughout his life. He mentions in the Messenger ﷺ's life, if there were no other miracles, because when we talk about miracles of the Messenger ﷺ, we talk about when he split the moon, when the tree spoke to him, and certain things which we'll discuss, and the reality of these events we'll discuss inshallah. But we speak about all these things when we talk about the miracle of the Messenger ﷺ. Ibn Hazm said that if we just studied the life of the Messenger ﷺ alone, without all these things, this will in and of itself qualify as a miracle. So the life of the Messenger ﷺ is a miracle in and of itself, and we can take several lessons from this. And inshallah, when we go forward and study the various incidents of the Messenger ﷺ, we'll always take a stop and we'll see how can we apply the life of the Messenger ﷺ into our own lives, inshallah. So these are some of the sources of the seerah. Okay, so what is the purpose of studying the seerah? Can we have some ideas on what the purpose of studying seerah is? Why do we look at the Messenger ﷺ's life and study it?
To use it as a model for our own life, how we should live it.
So that's one thing. We need to use it as a model of our own life. It's near the end of the Messenger ﷺ's life. The Battle of Hunayn has just taken place. One of the final battles in the life of the Messenger ﷺ's life. The Hawazin tribe has been defeated. A huge army has left behind armor, has left behind military weapons, has left behind camels, have left behind horses, and they leave it in a place called Hunayn. And the Muslims transport all of these things, all of the things that they have left, they transport to the nearby place of Ji'rana. A man by the name of Sufyan ibn Umayyah, he is now riding with the Muslims. He is riding with the Muslims after 20 years of opposition. He was one of the staunchest enemies of Islam, and at this point he's not a Muslim. And just 4 months before this, just a few weeks prior to this, the Messenger ﷺ granted him 4 months of amnesty after him refusing to surrender to the Muslims. Because what happened in the 8th year of Hijrah is the Muslims once again were victorious, and they conquered Mecca. They conquered Mecca, and now they were the powerhouse. So they conquered Mecca, and Safwan was one of the inhabitants of Mecca, and he refused to surrender to the Muslims. But despite him refusing, the Prophet ﷺ gave him 4 months of amnesty. And now I set the scene that he is in the plain of Hunayn. He is in the valley of Hunayn, and he is going to the nearby Ji'rana. And he has seen with his own eyes what the army of Hawazin has left behind. The Messenger ﷺ, he awards him 200 camels. And this man, Safwan ibn Umayyah, he's not a Muslim yet. And he's thinking to himself, I am one of the staunchest enemies of Islam. For 20 years, I've been against the message of Islam, and I've been actively against it. Why did he just gift me with 200 camels? And to talk about who Safwan ibn Umayyah is Safwan ibn Umayyah, his father's name was Umayyah, one of the staunchest enemies of Islam. He was the person who had Bilal as his slave, and he used to torture Bilal. And young Safwan is witnessing the torture of Bilal day in, day out. Bilal he's taken on the hot coal of Makkah to renounce his faith. He's saying, renounce your faith, renounce your faith. And little Safwan is observing this, what his father used to do. Safwan is that man who, because Bilal later on in the Battle of Badr, he ended up killing his father, Umayyah. He ended up killing his father. So Safwan wanted revenge. He is one of the individuals that pitched a plan to assassinate the Messenger ﷺ along with his cousin Umayr. But his cousin Umayr went to the Messenger ﷺ and he came back a Muslim. And this made Safwan even more furious. One of his close friends, Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl. Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl was the son of Abu Jahl, who was again the uncle of the Messenger ﷺ and again an enemy of Islam. Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl had just accepted Islam, and that was one of the people who Safwan grew up with. So this added to his fury. A few months before that, Khalid bin Walid, who again accepted Islam, was another close friend of Safwan ibn Umayyah. Khalid said to Safwan, just come to Medina. Just come to Medina and accept Islam, because that's it. The Muslims are going to win now. There's no point of you staying with the opposition. Come and join the Muslims. And Safwan says, by Allah, because they did have a recognition of Allah, but they also had a recognition of other deities, and that's why they were known as polytheists. But he said, by Allah, if every single man in Mecca pledged allegiance to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if every single person from the Quraysh rather, they pledged allegiance to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and became a Muslim, I will never accept Islam. So this is Safwan, who is a staunch enemy of Islam, and he said, I will never accept Islam. And now he's riding with the Muslims after being granted 4 months of amnesty, after being given 200 camels, and he's riding. And he catches up to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's in the army of the Muslims. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam recognizes him. He turns to him, and they see a ravine, which is a valley, and it's full of livestock that the Hawazin tribe have left behind. And the Messenger turns to Safwan and he said, is this pleasing to you? And Safwan said, yeah. And he goes, everything in this valley is yours. All this land is yours. And for the first time in 20 years, after being so furiously hateful to the Muslims and to the advent of Islam, first time he looks into the eyes of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, by Allah, no soul can bear this much goodness except for a soul of a messenger. And he accepts Islam. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. So Safwan ibn Umayyah, the reason for me just starting randomly telling you this story is Safwan, he knew of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He knew who he was, right? Because for 20 years he was against Islam, and his whole family, people from his own family had accepted Islam. One of his best friends, Khalid bin Walid, said to him, join the Muslims. And he said, no, even if everyone from my tribe, the Quraysh, accepted Islam, I will not join. And I will not join and ally with the Muslims, and I will not become Muslim myself. And this Safwan, for the first time, he actually looked into the eyes of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and learnt it for himself, and took the message for himself, and didn't rely on third-party narrations. Because for the last 20 years, the reason why he was against Islam is because he did not get to know the Messenger. So in terms of the purposes of this class, what is the purpose of this class? The primary purpose of this class is getting to know the Messenger. And it's a sad reality that in today's world, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, the reasons why they have enmity towards Islam, or the reasons why they find it difficult and hard to practice their faith, is because they don't appreciate the struggles that the Messenger ﷺ went through. They don't appreciate the battles that he went through for the sake of Islam, the inner battles and the outer battles. They don't appreciate that he had to go against his own tribe, his own family, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we truly appreciated this, and if we truly got to know the message and got to know the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if we truly got to know the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we would have a different outlook on life. So the first purpose of studying the seerah is getting to know the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who he was. Because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi, every companion that had an interaction with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a unique journey. They had a unique journey finding Islam and finding the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had unique interactions with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and every single one of them traveled a unique path. And there was some magical moment where they were jolted into the orbit of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he became part of their lives. So Safwan knew the Messenger, he knew of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he didn't get to know who in fact the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. And if we ask Muslims today about the seerah, we have snapshots of the seerah. I term them as snapshots because we look at them as isolated events. But when we look at the seerah as a whole and take it incident by incident and stop and reflect and think about it, then in fact the seerah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not just isolated events. And when we understand the context of the seerah, we understand the context of the Quran and where the Quran was actually revealed and who the Quran was revealed to. What are the contexts of these stories? When the Messenger ﷺ had the power, like I mentioned, when he conquered Mecca, he still gave Safwan amnesty. He still let him off. Even though at this time he was the powerhouse. And before this, prior to this, Safwan, the Messenger ﷺ knew Safwan was one of the masterminds in in his own assassination plot. If someone was going to assassinate me, never mind being friends with them, I would try and get back at them. But the Messenger ﷺ, when he had the power to do so, he let it go. And in order to understand the reasons why he did this, we need to have a deep appreciation for the seerah and a deep appreciation for his life. To understand that his choices, the choices that he went through and the choices he made, we need to really get to know the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And secondly to that, the seerah is as much about the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as it is about the lives of the other companions. Because when we learn about the seerah, we also hear about the incidents of Abu Bakr, of Umar, of Ali ibn Abi Talib, of Fatima, of Zainab, of his wives, of his daughters, of his friends, of his family members. We also learn about their events as well. And by learning the seerah, we are also getting to know the journey of the companions. We are following the journey of the companions. And what made Islam so irresistible to them? What made Islam so irresistible to them? Because every one of them had a unique journey. I've just told you the incident of Safwan. And that's one end of the spectrum. A man by the name of Salman al-Farisi, from Faris. He read about the Messenger ﷺ in the scriptures that he had. So he traveled and he read about the Messenger ﷺ, and he was looking for the Messenger ﷺ. He traveled all over. And at one point, after some unfortunate events, he was captured and he was made a slave and he was brought to Medina. And he never gave up his search for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as soon as the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered Medina and he laid eyes on the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he accepted Islam there and then. Here we have Safwan, who after 20 years of knowing of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Safwan, who the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was part of the Quraysh, his own tribe, it took him 20 years to accept Islam. Salman al-Farisi accepted Islam straight away just by looking at the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So every single companion had a unique journey that they underwent when it came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And regardless of the paths they took, their destination was the same. Their destination was that they fell in love with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the reality of love is that when you love a person, you want to find out more about them. It's like, even if that doesn't really help you much. For example, everyone's mom loves them here, right? Except for a few maybe. Everyone's mom loves them. So when your mom calls, like when my mom calls me, she asks me, what did you eat? What benefit will that give to your mom by knowing what you ate? But just because she loves you, that's why she wants to know what you ate. And she wants to know more about you. How was your day? How is that going to benefit her sitting like far away from where you are if you're not from Brighton, right? But she still wants to know, and that's the reality of love. When you love someone, you want to increase your knowledge about them. You want to increase your information about them. So this is in fact one of the primary objectives of the seerah as well, to increase our love for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to feel what the companions went through when they fell in love with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because once they fell in love with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Islam didn't become just a set of rules that they follow. Islam wasn't a set of rules that they follow and they find it burdensome to pray, they find it burdensome to observe the rules of Islam. But Islam became about not displeasing the beloved, which is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Islam became not to displease the beloved, which is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is the whole point of the seerah. So the second point is that we follow the journeys of the companions, and at each stage of his life, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a unique effect on the people around him, even before he was a messenger. And we see it in the characteristics and the qualities that was embodied in the companions around him. We see it in the benevolence of his foster mother Halima. We see it in the kindness of his wife Khadija. We see it in the allegiance of his cousin Ali. We see it in the trustworthiness of his best friend Abu Bakr. We see it in the bravery of his beloved companion Talha. We see it in the foresightedness of his beloved companion Ibn Umar. So when we just look around at who the men and women are around the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do we see? We see the distinctive qualities that he himself embodied. And we see what Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha spoke about when she said that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, describing him, she said, "Kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an," that his inner character was in fact the Qur'an. As in, he was a walking, talking Qur'an, because he embodied all of the characteristics that the Qur'an praises. And he forbade all of the characteristics that the Qur'an also forbade. So, by looking at the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and looking at the people around him, we see that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam encouraged greatness. He encouraged the people around him to be the best versions of themselves. And when we follow this and when we read about this, we should in turn have our own journeys where we get to know the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by reading about his life and the incidents and things that he went through, we should in turn try and achieve greatness ourselves and be the best versions of ourselves. And it was not just that they were part of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? A part of his seerah. He was an integral part of their lives. It wasn't just that they were part of his life. He was an integral part of their life. And that's something to just think about. So the second purpose is following the journeys of the companions. And the third point I just mentioned, what's the purpose of studying the seerah, is that we live the seerah. And this moves on from my last point, is that we live the seerah. And by living the seerah, we improve our lives. What do I mean by live the seerah? What do we mean by live the seerah? Sorry? We follow the seerah. So every incident that we see from the seerah, even though it might seem historic, all of the incidents and events that occurred in the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they might seem historic. How can we apply something that happened 1,000 years ago, 1,400 years ago? How can we apply that in the modern world? How can we apply that in the context of the West where we live in today? But in reality, if we look in the seerah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the example of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the exemplar nature of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the seerah, we learn that it is indeed timeless. He was the exemplar for humanity. And when we think about the modern attributes that people, the modern desirable attributes for success. We think about time management. We think about communication skills. We think about mannerisms, and the list goes on. And in reality, if we look deeply into the Seerah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Seerah of the Messenger, and we think about it, we find that all of these modern desirable characteristics to become successful are indeed there, and there's more of them as well. If we look about time management, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when people described him, his wife described him, he says he used to divide his time into 3 portions. Juz'un li rabbihi, a portion he used to divide for the worship of Allah, for his Lord. Juz'un li ahlihi, a portion for his family. He used to have family time as well. Wa juz'un li nafsihi, and a portion for himself. ثم جزأ جزه لنفسه بينه وبين الناس, and then he distributed the time he had for himself between himself and the other people, for the people to come and ask him questions, to help the people. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to look out for people. So the time management of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is something that we think is a really desirable characteristic, but it's in fact what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had. And he used to really care about people. He used to sallallahu alaihi wasallam divide his own time between himself and the people. He used to ask about people who aren't here. كان رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم يتفقد عن أصحابه. If someone wasn't there, he used to ask about them. Where's such and such an individual? I haven't seen them today. Are they ill? Are they feeling okay? But in the reality is today we don't act upon that quality of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If someone isn't in our class, right, and they're regular here, we might think, where are they gone? Are they ill? Is there something that they need? This was what was going through the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam's head. So we need to try and embody these characters as well. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to ask about people who weren't here. There was a lady in the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she used to sweep the Masjid al-Nabawi. She used to clean the Masjid al-Nabawi. And one day, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam noticed that she wasn't there, and he asked the companions, where is this lady? Where is this lady that used to sweep the Masjid al-Nabawi? And they said that she died, and we washed her, and we prayed the janazah of her, and we buried her. And the Prophet ﷺ said, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me that she passed away? And the Sahaba just thought, okay, whatever, she passed away, this is a normal thing that we do. But this lady, how insignificant must she have been in the eyes of the companions, but in the eyes of the Messenger ﷺ, she held significance. Because the reality was that every single person in the gathering of the Messenger ﷺ used to feel significant, and he used to make them feel like that. When he used to address a gathering, every single individual would think that he was tailoring the message to them. When he used to speak in full expressions. When he used to speak, he used to turn towards the person he was speaking to. When he used to indicate, he would not indicate with his finger, rather he would indicate with his full hand. And these were the mannerisms of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how he used to care for people. We talk about communication skill. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that I was sent to perfect noble character. That was one of the primary objectives why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent me. When he sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to speak, he used to turn towards people. And we speak about modern communications. I mean, we're taught that in university, how to communicate with people, right? We actually taught that. But by virtue of reading the seerah, these are the things we need to pick up on. These are the things we need to reflect on. So inshallah, this time when we go to the seerah, when we go through the seerah, it won't just be a reading of historical accounts. Rather, it will be the subtleties that we can pick up on and we can improve on in our own lives. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the scholars describe that he taught us how to be human. And this is what, in this modern world, I think we forget. That when we look back at the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see it as just kind of his time, the battles, the things he went through was relevant for his time. But no, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the primary objectives he was sent for is to teach perfection and to aim for perfection. And he was perfection, and he was the aim, and he was the exemplar for humanity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, that indeed in the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam there is a perfect example. That if you look at the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, that is the standard model, the gold standard that we should be aspiring to. So this is the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the third purpose of studying the seerah is that we live the seerah and we improve ourselves from what we learn from the seerah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the author of the book that I'll talk about in the end, when I describe the methodology of this class and how we're going to do it, the author mentions that the seerah, when we read the seerah, it's about opening up our heart. It's about taking your heart and making it bigger. The bigger your heart gets, the more it gives, and the more it gives, the bigger it gets. Because that's the reality of what the Messenger ﷺ did to the people around him. He opened up their hearts. Because he came at a time when they had, what in Arabic language, they had qaswatul qalb, they had hard hearts. And he softened the hearts, because he knew if you have rock, there should be springs that will come out from this rock. So he recognized this in his people, and he softened up their hearts. So the people that he was sent to were people with the hardest of hearts. But the transformation that they went through after spending time with him, the transformation that they went through after receiving the revelation, was the transformation that made them have soft hearts. So this is another purpose of our class. Another purpose of our class is when we look back at the seerah and we look back at the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we view it in our context. We view it in the lens of us living right here, right now, and the values we have today, right and wrong, the right and wrong that we have today. We look back at the seerah and we look at it in terms of this. But there are certain times and certain incidents in the seerah which we may not understand, which you may think, okay, the Messenger ﷺ did this in this particular occasion, why did he do this with us? And some things, based on our context, might not sit really right with us. And we might think that these things are unsettling to our kind of understanding of right and wrong. But we have to ask ourselves the question, that why do we find these things unsettling? And inshallah, this is what we want to evoke in these discussions, that why are these things unsettling to us? And we're going to inshallah spark debate and discussion regarding these certain incidents in the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But firstly, we need to understand them in context. We need to understand the context that these events had transpired in. Why did the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam feel so disillusioned in Mecca, when even the people around him were calling him as-Siddiq and al-Amin, the most trustworthy and the most truthful? The people were calling him that. He was a revered member of society. But despite that, why did he go and meditate up in the cave, even before he was a prophet? He used to go for days on end to the mountain, and Khadija, his beloved wife, used to take food for him. It's mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari that she used to go and she used to ascend this mountain, and wallahi, it's not an easy climb. I've climbed it myself. I got halfway up there. I had to come down. It was a hard climb, especially in the heat of Mecca. And wallahi, when you go up there, you see yourself that this was one of the daily paths that Khadija radiallahu ta'ala went up and down in. Whenever she used to run out of food, she used to have an idea, okay, I've given him 3 days of food. So after 3 days, she used to go and check up on the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she used to wait for him to descend down from the mountain. So why the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam felt so disillusioned in Mecca? Why did the Messenger ﷺ condone caravan raiding? Because when we talk about Battle of Badr, we will talk about how they raided the caravan, right? They raided the caravan. So why did the Messenger ﷺ condone caravan raiding? Why did he marry so many women? So these are the questions we ask ourselves living here, and we need to understand them in context and the reasons why he did it. We can't just say it, but the reasons why he did it. Why did the Messenger ﷺ command his companions to take war captives? Because isn't that against his mercy? How is he, the Nabi of Rahmah, and the Nabi of Rahmah, he says with his own words, that I am the messenger, I am the Nabi, I am the prophet of mercy. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, that we did not send you except as a mercy to mankind, for the entire mankind, not just for the Muslims. But despite that, he allowed his companions to take war captives. So isn't that against the mercy of the Messenger ﷺ and his merciful nature? Why did the Messenger ﷺ forgive, like we talked about Safwan, why did he forgive his fiercest opponents? Why was he worried all the time? Why? Because the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned about him. كان رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم دائم الفكر يتواصل الأحزان. It's mentioned in the Shama'il that he used to always be in the state of contemplation. He used to have prolonged periods of silence where he used to be thinking about things. يَتَوَاصَلُ الْأَحْزَانَ, and grief used to hit him one after the other. Why was he worried despite knowing that Allah will give him success in the end? Why was this worry in the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And these are the things we need to talk about, and we need to ask. Why did he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why didn't he stop the execution of the Jews of Banu Qurayza? When we come to the story, we'll talk about that. Why didn't he stop the execution? So we need to ask ourselves and discuss with each other, why does this bother me, and why I can't come to terms with it, and what is the context behind these events? And one of the authors writes that some people might argue that why would you, because us as Muslims, when we look back at these events of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the events that transpired in his life, we become kind of apologetic. That we say, okay, we try and say, oh no, it wasn't really like that, right? It wasn't like he didn't really know about it, or certain things. We try and kind of be apologetic about our own religion. But one of the authors, American Iranian author Reza Aslan, who mentioned in his book No God But God, mentions that there will be those who call it an apology. But in fact, it's not apologizing, it's defending one's religion. And what higher calling can there be than defending one's religion? But if we don't know about it, how are we meant to explain the context that it transpired in to non-Muslims, to the people around us, to those people who will ask us questions and forget about them? How do we explain it to ourselves that the religion and the Lord you are worshipping is the true Lord, and the religion that you are following is the true religion, and the rules that you abide by are the superior morals that were revealed from Allah? How do we kind of reconcile this within ourselves if we don't have the answers, right? So this is one of the major kind of points of this class, is we need to come to terms with those things that don't sit easy with us. And finally, we have our own personal and shared journey with a journey through the seerah, because the seerah is not just about you sort of reading the historical events. I've repeated this point so many times. It's about living the seerah. It's about reading a story of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and seeing how you can apply that to your life. It's about scribbling, next time I'm going to try and embody these characteristics that I've learned from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I see this bad quality inside me that I want to make a change towards. We need to be open to ourselves about it. We need to have a notepad or our diaries or whatever, our notes on our phone, and we need to think to ourselves, okay, this quality that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he conquered Makkah, he had the quality where he went into Makkah, not as a haughty conqueror, but he went in as a humble leader. He was on the horse and he was bowing down on the horse, and he was entering as a humble conqueror. And this is what the historians and the people around him described. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not haughty in nature. So that's why we need to take this character of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we are made a leader of a group, we need to understand that we need to be humble also. So it's just little subtleties that we want to share and pick up from the seerah, and we have our own personal journey of going through the seerah. So the way, inshallah, we're going to do the seerah is, rather than me, like today was just me, inshallah, talking to you, but what we want to do is arrange it like a book club. And the book we are going through is Martin Ling's the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, based on the earliest sources by Martin Ling's, which is a green book, and we have the PDF which we'll send around inshallah afterwards. But if you can get a physical copy, it would be really good, because then you can scribble on it and you can write on it. The reason why we've chosen this book is I think it's the best book in the English language, which has a focus on the literary kind of way and the descriptive method of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, describing it. I mean, there might be other books based on academic sources, but the Martin Ling Seerah actually has a unique way of going about it, and it's the best book in the English language in describing this. And yes, people might argue it does have problems in it in terms of the reliability of some of the narrations, because Martin Lings wasn't a scholar in the Islamic sense. He was an English literature professor at University of Oxford, and I think he actually died in Manchester. That's one side point, 2005. So Martin Lings, his seerah, he was a Muslim, he converted to Islam, and it's one of the best works in the English language, and we're going to use this as kind of a reading focus. So inshallah, every week or so, we're going to use this as the order for the class. So inshallah we'll send the PDF afterwards, and anyone who can get hold of the book, it's not really that expensive, it can be found in Amazon, can be found in the library. But if you have your own copy or an electronic copy, you can actually scribble notes around on the book maybe, or how this kind of relates to you and how you can embody these sort of characteristics. So we're going to start with Martin Ling's Seerah, inshallah. Okay. Before we start actually dive into the seerah, when we talk about the seerah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we talk about his life, where do we even start? Do we talk about the time when he received the first revelation, when he was in seclusion on the mountain and an angel came to him and said, read and recite? Or do we go even back from that? Do we talk about the time when he sallallahu alaihi wasallam went back and he was called as-Siddiq and al-Amin amongst his own people, the trustworthy, and he was known for his noble characteristics in Mecca? Do we start from there? Or do we go even further back from that? Do we talk about the moment of the incident of his birth, when the entire humanity was brought upon its knees, when the angels came down to witness his birth, when the mother of Abdurrahman bin Auf, she describes that when she was walking to the house of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as he was being born, the stars felt as if they were going to collapse on her. Do we start there? Or do we go even further back? And do we talk about the incident where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam's parents met, and Abdullah married Amina, and the incidents regarding that? Or do we go even further back? Do we go back to the incident of the field where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved the Kaaba from being destroyed? Or do we go even further back? Do we go back to the event where Ismail alayhi salam was left by his father, Ismail and his mom Hajar, was left by the father in a barren land in Mecca by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or do we go even further from that? So the reality is that if we talk about the seerah, the story of the seerah actually starts from the beginning of creation, because the whole purpose of creation was that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam be the master of creation, be the Sayyidul Mursaleen. Because the best of people are the Anbiya and Mursaleen, are the prophets, and the best of prophets is the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we go even further back. But where we are going to start from, inshallah, is the incident of Ibrahim alayhi salam and how he was brought to Mecca. We'll talk a brief history. It might be a bit boring, but it's really important to understand the dynamics in between the Arab tribes at the time, because we need to understand in what context was the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent to. We need to understand who was he sent to, and like what were the beliefs at the time, what was the culture at the time. And inshallah next week we'll start going through the history of the Arabs and the prologue, inshallah, before going on to the story of Ismail alayhi salam. So the first few chapters in the Martin Ling's book, do you know how many chapters it is?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, so I think it's the first 3 or 4 chapters. The PDF is available, but we'll send it around afterwards. We'll assign everyone, inshallah, to read the first few chapters of the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the history of Zamzam. It's mentioned there, and inshallah we'll take it from there. So next week, inshallah, we'll speak about the Arab history, the history of Arabia at the time, and the reasons why we need to know it. What is the reasons we need to know the history of the Arabs? I've just mentioned it.
To show that when the Prophet came, how he changed them, how they at first they had hard hearts, and then they changed them so they're more.
So we need to understand the context where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent towards, right? Who he was sent towards, and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose these people over the rest of humanity. Why did he choose them when they in fact had some really abhorrent practices in their society? They had they had tribalistic morals. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose them? We need to probe and ask these questions. So inshallah we'll conclude. Okay, this is inshallah next time. Okay, so we'll conclude with that inshallah, because I know it's been quite a long time, about 45 minutes, and inshallah we'll set the stage for next week by describing the history, Arabian history, and the context in which the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam received his message. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.